Hi, I'm Angelique. Welcome to Synced on Air. Today we have a special guest, Andrea Mueller. Sorry, I almost said what?
Andrea.
So, Andrea, welcome to our podcast. I mean, I'm so excited to meet you virtually. We've talked a lot over email. We've showed off some of your projects. You've won some Synced awards. I mean, it's just great to have you on.
Thank you so much.
And you're in Kentucky at Inside Out Landscaping and design and landscape. The main driver for us to get together was you've been announced as a fellow and an award winner. Can you please explain to everybody what you've very recently been awarded with, and then we'll hear some of your background. But this is the spur to get you on the podcast and write about you. So let's talk about that first.
Okay. So APLD awards fellowship to people who have been in the industry and actually in APLD for at least 10 years and who have shown leadership for, landscape design through various career achievements. And so I did get that, which was a really big deal for me. And then the other award was Leadership in Landscape Sustainability. And that was established to recognize an individual or organization that has demonstrated a commitment to environmental sustainability. And then that is through outstanding leadership, advocacy projects, initiatives, writing and or education. And then, of course, it results in benefits to nature and the practice of landscape design. And the award recipient, which is me this year. I'm so excited. I do remember when I first saw someone get this award and I was like, I want to get that one day. And when I was a very young landscape designer and at one of my first APLD conferences. So that was really, I cried when I got it. It really did mean a lot to me. Anyway, so basically that any recipient that gets this award and all of the recipients in the past who I admire so much have had such a broad impact on sustainability on either regional, national, or international scale. And
it's leading the industry too. I mean, it's not just, I think that sustainability is more in the forefront than it's ever been, and I think that, there are those trailblazers and you're one of them now. So, I think I was telling you before we started recording, I could tell just by following, your company and you when I first arrived in the States a few years ago, that you're doing some spectacular work and, with that sustainable approach. So maybe we should step back and kind of, learn a little bit about you and when you started the company and, let's start from the beginning then.
Okay. Yeah. So the very beginning, even before I started this business, I was raised in the horticulture industry by my dad, who started one of the largest nurseries in Kentucky. He had retail, wholesale, a 500-acre tree farm, landscape installation, all of it.
Everything.
And retail. I said retail already, yeah. So growing up, I knew I did not want to do retail. No, just to retail. But I was always interested in architecture. Actually, I wanted to be an architect, and I went to school for architecture, and I loved architecture and excelled in architecture, but not in calculus. So, anyway, I ended up with going through multiple different design programs, architecture, graphic design, interior design even.
Oh, wow.
And ended up in horticulture, landscape design. So I feel like all of that really does help, combine for outdoor spaces, the architectural component of it and looking at architecture of homes and then making the landscape complement that. So I love that was my path. And
from inside to outside.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, when I started my business, I was doing some interior design as well. So
It
Sorry, go
flows
ahead.
very well from that. It does.
It does.
I don't
It's
think
so important to me that it is a fluid movement from inside to outside. And I always ask my clients if I can see the inside of their home and how that flows to the outside, because that is important. And sometimes we might say, hey, let's add a door here, or let's think about how this is all working together, because we want it to be an extension of the home.
Yeah.
So, or a commercial space, same thing. So, So anyway, so I started the business as an interior and landscape design, but in this area where I am located, back in 2007 when I started the business, which was at the tail end of 2007, rolling into 2008, which was a great time to start a business. Which actually was a great time to start a business. Yeah.
You build resilience, and tougher conditions make you, make you a good business leader.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And we didn't have a lot of the overhead that a lot of the larger companies had, and we were operating out of our home like many, starter businesses are. And so we kept our expenses very low and didn't pay ourselves for the first year, and that's how that started.
Yeah. And I mean, starting at that kind of time is kind of like starting, just now. Like even 2024 has been quite a rough year for the nation. The stats are that our industry shrunk in 2024 by 5%. Okay. So, I think there's always these years that are tougher, but I think, like you said, your overheads were lower, scrappy and new, and and figuring out things. I think that it probably set a good scene for you to grow step by step.
Yes, it did.
So what were your first projects like? What, what paint us a picture?
I mean, they were mostly landscaping. So it started off with design, and I probably technically started, I was designing here and there. I started designing for my father's business, and he died in a car accident. So then I was still kind of designing once I left his business and once he was gone, but it was more like just small designs, helping a homeowner here and there. And that's kind of how our business started. Just doing residential designs.
And then when did you start going more sustainable? Or do you think that you were always doing that from the start?
That was always in the back of what I was aiming for. And my college education was definitely heavily focused on sustainability. And I remember William McDonough, who is a famous architect, came and spoke to my class when I was a senior at UK. And that had a profound impact on me. And I've always been interested in sustainability and in trying to live a better lifestyle for the climate and all of that. So I feel like you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. So I think I did the best with the tools that I had at the time, and that's always the case, right? We could still always be better. I'm always thinking and trying to research ways that we can be better, because I do believe that you can always be better at what you're doing, no matter how good you are.
And products are always changing, know. There's something that I bookmarked today about, panels, like cement panels that grow moss, and it makes them stronger. And we use a lot of cement in our hardscaping side of things. And there's a lot more, production, whether it's commercial or still in the test phase, of substitutes for that, that absorb CO2 instead of give off, so, I mean, I get really excited about, how cool people are that, we're developing new innovative products that are fighting all of the issues that we have today. And as a collective, we're doing some great work,
Yeah.
We just have to listen. We have to, keep on top of things. So,
for sure.
Yeah. And, I, I would say I started my business in the UK thinking that I would, only have natural stone from close by. And then I found that it costs double to get the local stone rather than the imported stuff. And then I would give clients the option and then they didn't want to pay more for it. I mean, and so my business, like my, I ended up not being able to be as sustainable as I wanted to when I started my business. How did you, as a company, how are you tackling those kind of things? Or do you find that there's ways or people are more aware of, sustainable products and want to do things better?
I mean, I feel like it is a niche for us and people know that is what we do. Of course, like I said, there's always things that can be done better, and budgets for sure play a role because unfortunately we don't all have infinite dollars in our bank account. So yeah, for sure that definitely plays a role in some of the decisions and some of the maintenance practices, and definitely in material selection. When I first started, similar to you, yes, a lot of the concrete products were a lot less expensive than natural stone. And so we started our hardscape division using those products. And I know that definitely, and I have a hard time too with our industry as a whole. I mean, obviously we have big trucks and we use a lot of fuel. And so it's really more about how we can offset some of those,
inputs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And how can we do the best with what we have? And how can we make these landscapes have less input in the long haul and make them not super high intense maintenance or inputs with fertilizers or pruning or pesticides and things like that. So I feel weird saying oh yeah, we're not so sustainable because we're innately in an industry that is using a ton of natural resources.
Yeah.
However, we can do the best, like I said, we can do the best we can with what we have and use native plants or resilient plants. It's not always about being fully native, just having resilient plants that can last a long time. Yeah. Without a lot of inputs, using less mulch, so using more plants. We do a lot of projects with green mulch instead of having.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
I love green mulch
because plants want to grow in communities and not be cut into little meatballs surrounded by mulch.
Yeah, and mulch serves a purpose when you first plant out a garden, but the thought of just dumping it on, on bare ground. Like I grow a lot of ground covers and use, but sometimes they go nuts,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like the potato vines, like at the office here, it's growing across the steps into the other bed and and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I'll trim it at some point. And
yeah.
But yeah, green mulches, I think I've been trying to convince my mom for ages to do that, but she likes the distinction between her plants, and so, everybody likes different styles too.
Exactly.
But I think, communicating why green mulch is important is another thing. It's not just for looks, is it? I mean, I think it's
exactly. And aesthetics for landscaping, I always tell everyone it's like art. Everyone has their own taste in art and design. And I do think with landscapes, we do need to change our perception of beauty because, we're kind of still in the model. I do feel like we're quickly shifting into more naturalized landscapes. And naturalized landscapes can also be legible and aesthetically pleasing, for sure. So I think it's just the level of wildness that someone is comfortable with,
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, some people have said to me, I'm going to put native plants here. And they're like, oh, so it's going to look like a mess. And I'm like, no, and I get a bit defensive, but I still like ornamentals. I like, the cultivars. Now there's nativars as well. So again, I think a blending is okay as long as you're looking at the inputs. You can't have ornamentals next to natives and them both thrive. But I think we have to transition to different. I think you're right, to different styles of design. One of our talks at Sync Live coming up is about how we can do maintenance differently. And I think you mentioned more plants. Do you think that in itself is a huge step forward in the right direction for maintenance? Or
I do. I mean, depending on the plant, of course, and always right plant, right place. But I know from experience in our own gardens that, we have areas that are very densely planted with different layers and levels and root systems, and they're much easier to maintain than some of the other landscapes that have, again, mulch. Because if you have open ground, you're going to have room for weeds. That's where weeds want to come in, right? So the lesser amount of open ground, then the better. So in general, when we are installing or even designing these landscapes, we're of course thinking about mature sizes and how and where these plants are going to touch one another. And then just making sure that there's layers, and even on the perennial layer, there's layers within the perennial layer, which can make the plants really difficult to, the guys are like, what do you do here? Why are all these plants so cool? So anyway, but yeah, it's, I do think that is one way of making a landscape. It's more like the matrix plantings, Pete Udoff and all of the great, there's so many great designers in the world that are using matrix plantings. And it's really just that idea of more diverse and complex. And sometimes they don't have to be complex. It could really be simple if that's the aesthetic that somebody needs to have that legibility.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and some of your jobs have won awards in 2024 APLD awards too. Do you want to give us a list of those too while we're at it?
Sure. Yeah. So one was West Banco, which is a bank in downtown Frankfurt. It's a brutalist style architecture, very like concrete facade, very brutalist.
Yeah.
There's really no other way to describe it. Yeah. So very modern. So we, and it was a challenge because it was designed on a green roof, essentially. So it was the plaza, but the plaza has a parking garage underneath of it.
Okay.
So the access was very limited with the equipment that we could put on the structure. The weight, of course, everything had to be engineered. And that was by an outside source. And then all of the calculations for the metal that we did raised core 10 metal planters that were powder coated. And then also just planted a lot of evergreens and matrix plantings of prairie drop seed, which is native, but then also added in some non-natives like allium because they have a long bloom period and their foliage looks good for a long time. And then northern sea oats because it does abut the Kentucky River, and that's a native to the area. So kind of bringing in that place concept to the design with plants that would naturally occur in that area. Unfortunately, they removed the matrix planting of prairie drop seed. Wow. So this is so we had discussed the plantings multiple times, had shown them multiple 3D renderings, and I think it was about 6 months after it was installed, they removed all of the matrix planting of the prairie drop seed. So now it doesn't look so great, but it did win an award when it was at its peak. It was really, really sad, and it's the understanding of, and again, we had discussed these plantings multiple times for months. So it's kind of again, it's an aesthetic thing, but then also making sure
that every team, is it that, you hand off to another team that does maintenance and maybe they don't understand?
Well, and no, it was, so the bank, it wasn't us. The bank removed it because I guess to them it might have been a little too wild, but it was very simple. And it was it's a very modern building. So the planting really did not dictate like a very complex planting. It just didn't need to be very complex. And so I did that matrix planting so it would be easy and aesthetically pleasing, and prairie drop seed smells so yummy when it's in bloom. And I think it does anyway. So anyway, so I think that is just important to say, because
it is.
We can design all these things and we can install these things. But at the end of the day, if the perception of beauty is not what we think it is, then it's not going to be a success.
It's going to be undone.
And it did get undone.
The bank was managing the maintenance of it.
Yes.
And so I guess, and that's what I mean, like design and build, and then hand it over to maintenance. Whoever does that, their perceptions, weren't in line, which is disappointing. And I think that you'll get the same disappointment if you only do a design and then it gets constructed and it's not, it doesn't have the feel that you designed it with, and I mean, that's a perfect example of why we're trying to talk across the disciplines as a media company, because we do have these gaps, landscape architects to a construction company, a GC, or it could be a landscape construction too. In between that gap is where it can change the scope dramatically and not feel the same. But just like what you said, in between install and maintenance, there's a big disconnect there too.
But for me, I feel like because we give very detailed maintenance guides, if we are not maintaining something, normally we prefer to maintain it, of course. The budget was a little tighter on this project, and so they were going to do some of the things. I won't get into all of the things that they did, but anyway, I do feel like it's more of a disconnect of the aesthetics of it. To me, it was beautiful. Obviously, I mean, it won an award, a silver award. I think that it, was a good design. I think just kind of it's the gap between designers and kind of the general public. And what do they find beautiful and what do we find beautiful? For me, it wasn't just beautiful. It was also sustainable. Functional. Because it wasn't matrix planning. It should theoretically have been very low maintenance and needed cutbacks once a year. Anyway, so that was hard. Anyway, so I didn't mean to get on that tangent, but I do think it's important to say any of the after the project challenges instead of pretending like it was all
everything's
perfect.
Rosy.
Yes, everything's rosy and it's all perfect all the time. But
as an industry, if we don't talk about those issues, we're never going to, work on solving them. It's not like talking about them is going to fix them, but we need to address these things. And it was interesting because, the reason why I want to talk a bit more about maintenance at our next Sync Live is at our previous one, somebody said, oh, but maintenance, we all do it the same way. And I thought, oh, goodness, we don't, and actually that's a big issue, and I think that if somebody doesn't, you can't force somebody to hire you to do the maintenance of every landscape that you install,
Right.
And it's just, not everybody's going to understand the purpose of each plant, or they don't like the way that plant looks. Well, but that plant has a purpose that is not just about aesthetics. It's maybe supporting the allium, or it's, there's so many other reasons to that. And it becomes out of our hands, no matter who we are in the industry. At some point, it's out of our hands.
It is.
For the client or for the maintenance company. And so that is a challenge because this is the other thing, dealing with living plants, it's a living landscape. And, you mentioned earlier planning for the mature sizes. Again, how many clients have you had to say, well, this is going to grow. It doesn't look like it right now, but this is going to grow to be this size, like in 2 seasons.
Right.
So there's so much about what we do that takes explanation, and there's a lot of science and a lot of, a lot to it. So
there is. Yes.
Great job on doing your part.
Yeah.
We have to go past that sometimes too. And it sounds like you put a lot of effort into that. And it still didn't 100% work. But
yeah, and that's okay. Yeah, I think it is important to have the conversations and to try to solve those issues. And again, with education, a lot of what I try to do is, write blogs or write articles to promote like different ideas of beauty and what that is. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so that was one. But I was also, we also got a silver award for Buffalo Trace. So if you like bourbon, then that's where I am. So,
awesome.
So we are surrounded. We're in bourbon country here in Kentucky, in central Kentucky. So we have done a lot of work for Buffalo Trace over the last 15 years, and we redesigned their new visitors entry, which was a huge project. We were redesigning like roads and entries, and
wow,
it was really big. And then we also wanted to screen. Normally we want to highlight architecture, and in this case they wanted to totally cover the architecture because the building was not very pretty, and it was the offices. They needed to keep the building, but they needed to camouflage it. So so that was a super fun project, and was a very interesting multi-layer trees, shrubs, evergreens, a few hedges, native perennials. Yeah, so that was a super fun one too.
Oh, that sounds like one we need to put in the magazine.
yeah.
Did you get samples of Buffalo Trace along through the project?
Yeah, they might do that. Actually, you can go to Buffalo Trace and get free samples.
Oh, okay. Plug for Buffalo Trace.
Free tours and free samples. So,
awesome. And see your work. Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds like you've had a great year with all these awards, and really proud of the work that you're doing. And thank you for leading the way in sustainability.
Thank you.
Yeah, love the work that you guys are
doing. And Buffalo Trace was another one. We actually did do a green mulch installation there. And that was maybe one of the first ones. And I think one of your questions earlier was, when did I get into sustainability? And my answer was that I was kind of always into it, have always been into it, and always been, we've had solar panels and been net zero for 15 years almost. And so we've always been thinking about these things. My first native garden, like purely native garden, was in 2010. So about 14 years ago was when I really started getting into native plants. And I don't exclusively use natives, but I definitely don't use invasive species, and am a very big advocate against invasive species in the industry. And I still don't understand why some people are using them and installing them. And again, I think it's education. So that's been one of my biggest things that I've fought for. So
well, and something that I was surprised to know about is, just looking where I am, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, we have different invasive lists, and you're like, they should be this, we're in the same zones. We're, like, how can we get all of the state, aware and stop selling invasives first off, stop, planting them. But if they're not available to buy, then that would help.
It would. Yeah. I know we have an invasive plant council, and they're working to, outlaw invasive species. So I think I started on the local level just with our local ordinances and wrote the ordinances for that and just donated that time, because to me, it's so important and it did take a while to go through all the plants, like the acceptable list and the non-acceptable list. And so if you can start locally, if each of us can start locally, then we can make a broader impact later, I feel. So, yeah.
I think that is it's important for our wilder spaces as well, because these invasives are getting into the roadsides and, taking over our natural habitats, and destroying them potentially if we don't.
Yeah. Well, and it's also really interesting. So I try to also educate clients. So, like, I'll have a client who says, I want burning bush. Still, people want burning bush for whatever reason. I can't figure it out. But I'm like, here are all these other options. So give other options and like turn it into a positive, like, oh, this one blooms and it has red fall color, or and it has berries. So just trying to, again, shift perspectives and educate and then give better solutions.
Well, we used to have a feature that we were covering alternatives and it's just hard to find people that have time to help us with that. So maybe we need to talk offline for that.
I'd be happy to. Really, and I'm probably on our blog. A lot of it is focused on native and invasive species. Yeah. So awesome. I'm happy to do that or to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, we'll follow up with that in another episode. How about that?
Okay. That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for, sorry, I'm saying Andrea instead of Andrea. Andrea, it's my British influence sometimes, but it's been great having you on, and congratulations for all of your awards this year.
Thank you.
The leader in sustainability from APLD is fantastic, and you deserve it. So
thank you.
Keep doing what you're doing, and look forward to working with you on more articles.
Yeah, you too, Angelique. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.